And if I decide to waste time on social media, on TikTok, on Netflix, etc., I simply cannot spend as much time on those things that I feel are important in my life.
Yeah.
You're listening to the Dare to be Different podcast, a podcast for people who want to live an extraordinary life. On this week's episode, Joe sits down with Ed Newell to talk about how to take advantage of life's most precious moments. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Dare to be Different podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I am here today with Ed Newell, the most interesting, you are the most dynamic podcast co-host that is in the room today. So,
That is such a high compliment.
it was like really leading up, but then
yeah.
I'm like, wait, my wife is a co-host. I have to
temper this down a little
I have
bit.
to bring it down a little bit.
Well, I'm happy to be here, Joe.
Man, we've been having a lot of fun. We have another room full of people here today.
I know, more interns.
Interns
Great.
and people over in the other room, you
Yep.
know, in the off studio,
The annex.
whatever you want to call
that.
through the window.
Yeah.
So the Dare to be Different podcast is all about living an exceptional life, and we do that by pointing to 5 words that we really try to use as different ways of forming our topics. I don't know how else to say it, but it's honest, passionate, adventurous, grateful, and healthy. And man, I am stumbling through the intro here, Ed.
Hey, that is okay. We're all about living an extraordinary life. How about I take over?
There you go. Help me out, brother.
And honest, passionate, adventurous, grateful, healthy. We really believe that every single thing about living an extraordinary life can come down to one of these 5 principles. And so, we're always want to challenge you, the listener, challenge ourselves, challenge each other to take ground in these areas of our lives.
So a couple things have happened over the last week that I want to talk about that lead into our topic here. But the first is, we were talking about it just before we started. I started jogging again.
Oh.
Yeah, me and my dog.
Yeah.
Every morning. And the reason that I'm able to stomach jogging, I've figured it out, is that I have such a short attention span that I can't live in my own mind for very long. Like
Okay.
I can't just sit there and not have something that I'm digesting, something that, so I started listening to audiobooks, and then I figured out a way to have audiobooks that would stream on my phone. So now I can go out and jog. I can go out in a half hour, 45 minutes, whatever the case may be, without getting terribly bored.
Okay.
And get a little bit healthy. That's one of our words.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
I also like to run. I never listen to a book when I run, though. I don't really listen because I have to. I guess you're jogging, so I guess it depends on your speed of pace that you would describe jogging. I guess if I was jogging and it was a light jog, you jog with your dog.
Jog
right?
with my dog. Yes.
Jog with your dog.
Yes.
If I was jogging, I guess I might be able to have the mental capacity to be in that space. But when I'm running and I'm like trying to like keep a certain pace and keep a certain heart rate up and get a certain time in, it's like I gotta have music in that circumstance to like keep me driving forward.
Well, and I really want to be clear when I say that I'm jogging. so this is it's like 6 minutes of walking, 2 minutes of jogging, running. 4 minutes of walking, so I'm kind of like doing the couch to 5K, like not officially doing the couch to 5K, but that's kind of where I'm at right now.
But you're on day 1 forever.
Something like that.
Well, that's cool.
Here's my thought. It's better than what I was doing the day before that.
That is true.
So
that is true.
I'm out and just trying to be a bit more healthy. And it's been such beautiful weather here too, which is kind of rare to have a long stretch like this in Pittsburgh. So
yeah. So you're doing some serious multitasking there.
I am.
You're getting exercise. You're walking your dog, and you're learning something.
I know, dude. I'm going to pack as much as I can into that half an hour. That's
well, I think that's really sets up what we want to talk about today, which is, I don't know how you want to phrase this: time appreciation, time management.
Time management. I mean, I had a little bit of a one of those awakening moments. So my grandmother passed away recently, right? And so I'm one of the rare people, and one of my business partners said this, I'm one of the rare people that I still have a grandfather, and I'm also a grandfather. There's not a lot of people in the world that have that many generations.
Interesting.
And so, but from watching, watching my grandfather bury his wife of 65 years, And being at this age that I am right now, I'm at this really, I don't know, it's an interesting time because I have this appreciation for how short life is, but I still feel like I'm going to live forever, right? So
Right.
if I feel like before you hit kind of middle age, which is where I'm at, you're a little bit younger than me, but when you're younger than that, you still like, you don't have I don't necessarily think that you have that appreciation that, man, this thing's going to end someday. You know, this walk on this earth is going to end someday, and you might intellectually know it, but you haven't necessarily emotionally internalized it.
Interesting.
And I think that's actually one of the reasons that people go through a midlife crisis is they
come to that understanding.
They come to that realization that, wow, I'm not going to live forever.
Yeah.
But I'm at this interesting age at 45 where I can appreciate the fact that it's going to end, and especially when you have something like a death or something like that, where you're like, man, I'm mortal. Like this, I only have so much time left. But I'm also still young enough that I feel like that's a long way off.
Right.
You know?
I would say I agree with you 100%. I feel like for me, maybe I have a greater appreciation of time since I've had kids. And so my oldest is almost 5 now. And I think when you have kids, you're constantly in that state where other people would previously tell you, hey, it's going to go quick. Like, you know,
right.
Make sure you remember these years. And in the moment you try to, but every day with a kid is so new and different and exciting, and they're learning things, and time, keeps going, and it does go quick. And now as an almost 5-year-old, I can look back on those pictures of the baby and think, oh my gosh, like I can't believe how fast time went. When I didn't have kids, maybe I had some of those moments sometimes in my life regarding me, but our lives are so self-centered, so self-focused, and we're always so, interested in what I have now and what's coming up. You do kind of just let time continue to move fast when it's just all about you. But when it becomes about someone else, maybe a death in the family, or maybe you're talking of kids or grandkids, it does give you a different sense of time's moving. And I don't know I got to make sure I'm taking advantage of it.
I think that the thing that I want to talk about today, and I don't have a big outline. I don't have my iPad in front of me. I just wanted to have a dialogue with you about this. My grandfather said something to me, and it was just so, man. Again, I don't want to get too emotional here, but he was like, "What I wouldn't do for one more day with her." And what happens when you start living like that? Like, what about your priorities change? And I'm not talking about a relationship, but what about your priorities change when you start living a day as if it's so cliche, but as if it's your last. You know what I mean? Like that you don't want to waste any of it. So right. I was thinking through through that conversation, if this was his last day with her, right? What would be different? You know what I mean? Like what would he do different if he knew that she was gone tomorrow? Okay, and that's a whole nother podcast. Like we can talk about that. It's all about relationships and making sure. But from the same side, if we took that perception about our day-to-day lives, would we act in the same way?
Yeah.
And I say this as I, yesterday flipped through TikTok for 45 minutes, and then you turn around, you're like, it's dark outside? What happened?
Right, right.
And so you're like, man, the world is just so full of time sucks.
Yeah.
And how do we protect ourselves from that and make sure that we're, when we come to the end of this race, when we come to the end of this journey, when our last footstep falls on this earth, that we didn't go, wow, according to Apple, I spent 30% of my time, on social media,
Facebook,
So, and that's a struggle for me. It really is. I think it's a struggle for everybody.
Yeah.
I think it's a struggle, especially for young people that have been, I didn't grow up on social media. And you were at the edge of that.
Yeah.
But I look at my kids who grew up on social media, and that's the norm.
Right.
How do they protect themselves as they're looking at, man, I'm wasting an awful lot of my life, making connections with people that I'm not actually connecting to, caring about things that people are posting that I don't necessarily care if they post, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
How do we live a life that is fuller instead of just being full?
Yeah. Wow. That is a good question right there. I've struggled. I think I've thought through this in the past, but I almost feel like I have a struggle with this hypothetical because I could easily see that the things that, just make my life full, or the things that maybe are time wasters or just fill time. Some of those times, some of those moments, you really are looking for a brain break, right? Or you really are looking for a time to relax, right? And so it's like, okay, the best thing I could possibly do for myself right now might be to watch Netflix. And I guess you could argue that. But in the moment, I feel like it is. Now, if that moment is happening for 8 hours of your day and is repeating 7 days a week and expanding out, then I think you got a problem, and you're probably lying to yourself about how much you actually need Netflix. But using it responsibly, I think, is something different. And so, obviously, we don't know who you are listening to this, and you could be on any end of the spectrum. But I think you ask a really good question: is if we could just evaluate how we are spending our time, how we're managing our time, but how we're valuing the time, how we're prioritizing where we're putting our time versus other things. I think it leads you down a really healthy self-reflection to really assess, okay, what am I valuing in this? Because where you put your time is really going to show what you value. And, there's really, when you're at a funeral, no one's really talking about necessarily your accomplishments in the business world, right?
Right.
They're talking about who you are as a person. They're talking about your relationships. They're talking about how you carried yourself. And that's where I would want to hope that I'm putting my focus the majority of the time. That even if I need to fill some time, it's maybe within the context of who I am as a person and relationships.
And that's a great point. So, one of the things, and this happened 3 days ago, I bought a football. All right. So my girls and I went for a trip, and we're like, hey, where's the football? We want to take a football. And it was like wore out from being in the pool, right? So I bought a football and came in Amazon because
that's where you buy things.
That's where you buy things now. And so it shows up. My wife's like, why did you buy a football? I'm like, because we're going to play catch. You and I are going to play catch. And she's like, and my wife, I love her to death, but she grew up like a hillbilly, right?
Yeah.
So she can hunt and fish and all that stuff. She can't throw a football to save her life.
Okay.
So later that afternoon, as we sat down to do our, nightly Netflix, when it's still light outside at 8 o'clock at night, but you're kind of winding down, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, let's go throw a football. Like, I'll give you another lesson in throwing a football that, I did it once 20 years ago. I'm going to try again.
Yep.
And we went outside and we caught football for like an hour.
Wow.
It was one of my favorite moments. It was probably my favorite hour of the last couple months, was just sitting there catching football with her, laughing a little bit, but talking and connecting. We could have sat there and watched Netflix. That's our normal, like, we're in the middle of Alone. I don't know if you've watched Alone.
No, I haven't. But
it's awesome. But anyway, we could have sat there and watched Alone. We could have done anything like that, not communicate or anything like that.
Right.
We decided to go out. Again, my brain turned off during that time, right? I'm not thinking about work. I'm not doing any of those things. So I had that relaxation moment.
Yeah.
I had it with my wife. I connected with my wife, and it was a beautiful hour.
Yeah.
So, making that choice to spend that time with her when I could have wasted it, it's huge.
Yeah.
It really, really is.
Yeah. And it's not to say that you guys can't ever watch Netflix together, right?
No.
But
Trust me, later, after we came in, we watched Netflix.
Watched Netflix. Right? Yeah, you just stayed up later and you lost sleep. So, we're recently, for us, there have been these moments where my kids are really into riding their outdoor, like, motorized cars.
Yep.
Like, they're just obsessed with them. It's all they want to do. What that's created for us is this opportunity to just sit, and we got to keep an eye on the kids, right? We got to, like, watch them do whatever they're doing. But you just sit and just hang out. And if we go to my parents' house, same thing. My kids want to ride the electric cars. My parents have a lot more land, so we'll go over there a lot. And we've just literally, with myself, my wife, my parents, and then my brother and his sister, who live actually next door to my parents, we'll just send out this group text. And we're like, driveway hangout.
Right.
And that we'll just all come down. We all have a chair. We're all, have a cold drink, and we're just literally sitting there. The kids are going crazy doing their thing, and we just hang out and we just talk. And it's such a simple moment, but it's a really profound time, I think, for our family, just to spend time together and appreciate one another and talk about anything. I think there's these little there's these little moments that maybe aren't as easy or maybe aren't as accessible, because any relationship is work, and any relationship you have to be intentional about. It takes very little intentionality to watch Netflix, right?
Right.
But doing something with another individual in a relationship is always going to take some degree of intentionality, and there has to be some level of commitment. And if you can arrange the things, your life around people, man, I think your life is going to feel fuller. Your life is going to feel healthier, because you're going to have these healthier relationships that are overflowing in every area. So yeah, for me, I think the other thing when I think about time appreciation is just setting aside. This is very similar to what you just said, but setting aside time with my kids, but individually. And I've noticed that too often I fall into this trap where we're all doing stuff together.
Yep.
But there's something so special about when I spend time one-on-one with each kid, and the individual personality that comes out, and the individual dynamic at play between myself and my son, or myself and my daughter, that isn't necessarily there if it's all three of us together, or if it's with my wife included. And so I've been trying to be more intentional about how I spend time with these individual component relationships in my life. And again, just to better use my time.
So, one of the things about, and we've been really concentrating on relationships because that's what we started talking about.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, we look up to successful people, and I look up to successful people, business wise, whatever the case may be, whether it's politically, business, and the fact of the matter is, we have the same amount of time as every other person on the earth.
Mm-hmm.
All of us have 24 hours in a day. It's just that simple. So, when we're looking at the amount of time that we have and the way that we spend our time, yes, relationships are important. I 100% believe it. I think that those are arguably the most important thing in your life.
Sure.
But, I'm also a businessman. I want to have the most successful business that I can possibly have.
Right.
And if I decide to waste time on social media, on TikTok, on Netflix, et cetera, I simply cannot spend as much time on those things that I feel are important in my life.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of it, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago, if you begin with the end in mind, again, that's a Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If you figure out what your goals in life are, and try to get them down to a handful, that you can kind of wrap everything up into. I want to have an amazing relationship with my wife for the rest of our lives. For the next 40 years, I want to have an amazing, I don't know if I'm going to live that long, but I want to have an amazing relationship with my wife. Well, that needs to be, I have to have that perception through every single day, so that I'm spending that valuable time, that 24 hours that I have, to cultivate that relationship. I want to have a successful business. I want to take care of my family financially now and also into the future. So I have to have that as a priority. So that means that, I need to spend less time on TikTok and more, concentrating on my business. I want to have a healthy body, which means that, I get up a little bit earlier than I normally would so I can go out jogging with my dog.
Yeah.
So again, those types of things, I think prioritizing the things in your life help you to understand where you're wasting it, where you're wasting it, period.
100%. Have you read The 4-Hour Workweek?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that's coming to mind right now. And I had to just look it up to jog my memory of it. But that's all this is, I think, to a larger extent. And if you haven't read the book, it's phenomenal. But I think people dream that they could actually have a 4-hour work week, and it is possible. He talks a lot about passive income and things like that in portions of the book too, which if you can set up passive income, great. But I think there's a lot of other principles that are really good in it, which defining your value sets, defining what's important, defining where you want to put your time. He talks about eliminating unhealthy things, right? And so again, maybe it's not entirely eliminating TikTok. If you're a TikTok dancer and you want to go do a TikTok dance and crush it, okay?
Right.
If you really want to own TikTok, but don't let your entire life become about TikTok. He talks about liberating yourself, from work if you've set these other things up well. But one thing that he talks about in relation to really setting up like a passive income stream for yourself or something, is automating your life. He talks about that idea, kind of automating your life. I like to do that, but in other really random ways. Like I've said this to my wife that if I have like a something I need to do in a typical day that I find that I have to repeat often, I will always try to find some sort of app or system that can automate that thing because I want that time back. And I don't want to waste time. Man, something so stupid. It'd be like um, if I have to send an email to a group of people over and over and over again, make a group in your contacts folder so you can just type the group name instead of typing everybody's name, 20 different times. If I'm doing that often, that's a really, really small one. But if I find these things in my life, I'm always looking for ways to automate these certain areas of my life or these certain things in my life to better make sure that I can actually focus on the things that I want to focus on. I'm kind of a techie nerd and like a tech guy, but I think you don't necessarily have to be a tech guy in order to maybe figure out some of these principles. I also have this thing with me that like I hate wasting time. Like, and I found this over my life that if I'm like driving somewhere and I make a wrong turn, or I'm driving somewhere and the road's closed for some reason, I get like really anxious.
Oh yeah,
and I feel like I'm wasting time because I didn't find the most efficient route to get there. And so every time I get in my car, and I'm usually going to places that I have been to 1,000 times, I throw it into Google Maps always.
interesting.
And because I just put my life in the hands of Google that they know a better way to get there than I do.
You're that person that drives into the lake. Google said
it
this.
said to
I'm
go
supposed to
into
make
the
a
lake.
left. I don't know what to say.
But for me, Google obviously is going to know if that road's closed way ahead of it. And for me, I don't want to waste time hitting that road closed. Now, again, I'm a little obsessive with that than I should be. But I found that I've like put in these small practices in the practical areas of my life that to me I have found to be really advantageous. And it does help me to make sure that I'm not going to waste time in these small little anecdotal things, and it's going to help me, I don't know, use my time better. One other one that I use in the practical, just in my work, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the name of it. It's a time management method. It has a little tomato. I don't even remember what it is, but I have an app on my phone. I need to look this up.
Is that the one where it changes color based off of where it's at in your list or something like that?
Maybe the Pomodoro technique.
Okay.
Have you heard of this?
No, I haven't.
The Pomodoro technique. So basically, it sets up your work intervals into 25-minute segments.
Okay.
And so typically, and you can kind of arrange it, but there's like some standardized ways, and there's apps. I mean, free apps on any device you have. You can download a Pomodoro app, and you'll work for like a 25-minute chunk, and then it'll give you maybe like a 5-minute break, and it's all on a timer, and then 25-minute work, 25-minute work, and then you get a 25-minute break. And for me, it keeps me sectioned, because if I'm not careful, I will sit down to work on this thing, and then I gotta, look something up online, and then it's such an easy click up to my favorites bar, which has Twitter on it, and then I get sucked into some tweet, which sends me to a YouTube video, and I'm watching YouTube now when I should be working on my thing. And I don't think that's uncommon, right? Like, I think people just get sucked into these little traps. YouTube, literally, their autoplay feature wants you to get sucked into the YouTube black hole. So all of this is kind of set up to be this way, but I found intentionally implementing something like the Pomodoro technique within my work life has been so helpful, especially if I know I'm going into a day, I have a lot on my plate this day. I can't really afford to let these distractions get to me. I'll turn on my Pomodoro app, and I'll just let it kind of carry me through the day. When I'm in the zone for a 25-minute chunk, I will put on do not disturb on my devices, and I'm just gonna power through. I might even set little small goals, like I want to get this far into this project in these 25 minutes. And there's that philosophical concept where they say, like, if you give yourself 2 hours to do something, you'll get it done. Or if you give yourself 4 hours, it'll take you 4 hours. I don't remember what that's called. But I've found that to be true when implementing that into the Pomodoro technique. And all of this, not really putting a phrase to it, comes back to time appreciation.
It does, and I'm a little old school when it comes to, especially when it comes to work things. I'm a to-do list person. I'm a before iPads and Apple Pencils, I was a yellow legal pad, and I would write a to-do list out. And I would keep adding to it until I got to, and I would cross things out, as I went through. When I got to the end of the page, I would start a new page with anything that was left on the first page. And I probably still have 50 of them laying around somewhere.
I didn't know that about you.
Yeah, I'm a to-do list person. Now it's on an iPad, but I still write. I use a, I use a writing app, like a notes app.
Yeah.
And I write them out and, I check them off. And then once I get to, I do 2 pages now on the app. Once I get to 2 pages, I start it over and start with a smaller list on the next one. So again, to me, that is, it does 2 things. Number one, we're way off topic, but
I think this is all kind of fitting into time appreciation, right?
It is. Well, I'm going to take a little off because I'm going to give 2. First is I have to, just because of how busy I am with my work life, I have to prioritize and I have to write things down. The other thing for me is that, I get some anxiety when I'm overwhelmed with things.
Yep.
And a to-do list takes away that anxiety. As crazy as that sounds, it really, really does. I have a ton of stuff that happens to me during fires that I have to fight, all of those types of things, and I can't do them all at once. So I find myself, if I'm not writing them down, I feel anxiety. I get tight in the chest, all that stuff. When I write them down, now I'm starting to formulate a plan. So even though I haven't done anything to solve them, I've made that first step and I put it on the to-do list.
You're prioritizing. Do you do like the most important or the most like time consuming first or?
No, when I put them on the list, they're just there on the list.
Okay.
So then I can kind of go through the list. So I'm looking at that list probably, I don't know, 25 times a day.
Got it.
And because I'm adding to it or I'm crossing things off and things like that. So they're always in front of me. And it's just, because sometimes I'll do an easy thing that isn't necessarily as important because I can get it off the list. It's one of those I've
heard of that. Yeah.
This is.
I'm not a list guy, so yeah.
Okay, this is a 1-minute email. And I can get it off my list. All right, boom. This is much more important, but it's a bigger project and I don't have the time for it. So that has to stay on there for a little while longer.
Interesting.
So
I've done the same thing, but I've never been a formal list guy. And most of the time, if I have a big thing that I know I need to accomplish, I try to get up early to tackle that one thing, and then it feels like I've got it out of the way during this spare time in my day, right? Like if I get up early to tackle it, and then I still have the rest of my day. That's typically how I prioritize it, but it's all in my mind. It's never really written down on a list.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, we are speaking of time, we're over our time limit, and this is a big subject. I think that we will probably talk about this again in the future, or maybe an aspect of it, just because, look, it's life. We're only here. We're not promised tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so, I think a big part of having an exceptional life is to appreciate what is going on right at this moment.
Right.
And so, we have to talk about this more.
Yeah. And whether that's focusing on some practical time management things that you can implement in your day, or whether that's figuring out how you can eliminate the crap, or whether it's talking about replacing some activities with better ones. I think all of these things kind of play into, am I using my time the best way that I possibly could?
Yeah, because we're using our life.
Yep.
This is it.
Yep.
There's a minute that just went by as we were talking that I don't get back.
Yep.
So am I using it? I personally think that I could not be using this minute any better, Ed, than having this discussion with you. So, or else I wouldn't be doing it. As crazy as that sounds, that's the truth.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, to all the listeners out there, I really, really hope that you've got something out of it. If nothing else, just a new appreciation for today. A new appreciation for how you're spending your time. Maybe open your eyes when you're flipping through Facebook. Is this the best way that I can spend this time? One of the things before we sign off, one of the things that as you're having your parking lot parties and your kids are running around, playing on their toy trucks and stuff like that. I hope And I know I've known you for a long time. I'm sure that this isn't the case, but I see a lot of people doing that and then still sitting in there on their phones and not enjoying that moment. Stay in the moment.
Yeah.
Enjoy that time with your kids. Watch them. Getting their picture up on Facebook is not the most important thing, believe it or not.
Yeah.
We all love seeing your kids,
Yeah.
but you enjoying them and spending time with them is so much more important than some complete stranger that you met in third grade.
Yeah.
Getting to see how cute your kid is.
Right.
So anyway, we love you guys so much. Thank you for listening to the Dare to Be Different podcast. You know somebody that is wasting their life. Send this podcast to them. You know they need it. Tell them to take the 31 minutes that we've been talking and listen to this, and so that they can live an exceptional life as well. So thank you guys so much. We appreciate you. We love you. And just remember to live an exceptional life an extraordinary life. Live an extraordinary life because an ordinary one will always be waiting for you. Thanks a lot. Talk to you soon.